Yeah, so this call, I wanted to set up for everyone to sort of have a bit of a discussion what's happening with the MIPs. And I think much more, and maybe the even more exciting part, as it looks like these MIPs are well on their way of being ratified, sort of looking at sort of what the community feedback has been so far, like where we're going at next week, right? When we have these MIPs in place, what it means for the community, and sort of where we have to do the follow-up work. I think sort of the MIPs, and that's my personal interpretation, are sort of maybe a bit like the Constitution, or like the highest level guidelines that we have to sort of interacting in this DAO, and so now we need to come up with like the day-to-day rules based on these on the Constitution. We have to come up with the laws and the rules that we put in place sort of on a daily basis. I think just super curious to hear from who most of you guys are. I would put people maybe roughly in like 3 different baskets, and I would love to hear from a few people on this call what your reason is for attending. I think there's like the first category of people that are coming to this process saying, I want to actually fill out MIP6 collateral application, or I'm interested in bringing more collateral on board. So like, what does this process mean for me? And then there's the other side where you have people who are saying, I want to be part of actually vetting these collateral applications, or maybe I'm part of the Maker Foundation and I work with oracles, or I do some other part, so I'm like on the receiving end of this. And then maybe there's like this third bucket of people that are maybe just like community members, stakeholders, people that just want to know what is backing the DAI that they buy, or sort of just voting in the DAO, right? So just maybe as a super quick way to give some introductions, popcorn style, if you guys want to just shout out like what you're interested in, what bucket you consider yourself in, and what you'd like to hear. Maybe we can do a few of those right now.
I'll go first. Hey guys, I'm Andy. I'm on the Foundation Smart Contracts team. So I'm really interested to kind of hear what other people's thoughts are about collateral onboarding and kind of how that will affect our day-to-day work going forward, as far as actually building the adapters and all that kind of stuff.
I just suggest something related to the agenda. I mean, I think let's do this for like another 5 minutes or so, right? But because I only have, I've got 20 minutes left, I can still join. I want to go through some of the questions, and also, like, there's a few practical things I want to go through.
Yeah, if
so we can jump into that after the introduction.
Yeah, not more than 2 or 3 minutes. Like, if people want to weigh in, just to know where we can want to take the conversation. Otherwise, you can jump into some of the questions I posted. But yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can jump into the questions now and
Sure.
continue the conversation of the collateral onboarding set after.
So I like sort of started the initiative on this call, I think, because I posted a few questions, and really I think it's like what happens next week, right? And how do we implement these MIPs? Like, who would be what would be first good candidates for let me get the abbreviation right, elected paid contributors. Where do domain teams need support? What is the coordination? Where can the foundation help, and where does the foundation need help? And so I think those are sort of the things I brought up. Is that, Ruben, I assume that's what you were referring to, right?
Yeah, and also, I mean, there's some specific points that I think make sense for me to talk a little about now, right? So I think actually, first of all, it's like, practically, how do we get started with the governance cycle next month, right? If the MIPs are ratified. Yeah. Because there hasn't actually been any talk about sort of like the practical implementation, and specifically, how does it interact with the weekly cycle? Mm-hmm. And as I was going through it, like, so there is actually one minor point, like, so there's something we actually need to change in MIP3 that makes it possible to have it all fit together nicely. But generally, the two can actually run perfectly fine alongside each other. I mean, the complexity is going to be pretty severe, that's for sure, right? And we'll have to slowly ease into the monthly cycle to make sure that the weekly cycle doesn't run out of control. And sort of to put the whole thing in broad context, right? Like MIP 3 and the monthly cycle was designed for the governance paradigm, right? So it's designed for a future where there is no such thing as a weekly executive, right? Because all the sort of the day-to-day stabilization stuff has to be done with instant access modules over time. So like initially we'll have this slightly awkward situation where we actually have like two sort of like parallel governance cycles. We have the weekly cycle where we, often we've got trouble with the executive votes and so on, right? And then it's not the optimal way to adjust DSR and stability fees. But it works, and we'll continue to use that until we can get a replacement in place. And then simply, so it's effectively like added on top of that, we then also have the different components of the monthly cycle, right? So for instance, you could have, let's say in the first week of the month, right? You'll just have a weekly cycle, and you have the formal submission process, right? So there's actually no interaction there. The weekly cycle just goes ahead as normal. Then in the second week, it's like it becomes, it changes a bit, right? Because then we'll both have a bunch of votes for the weekly cycle, and then also potentially quite a lot of votes in the inclusion poll, and all of that will essentially will happen in parallel, right? Because it all comes down on the Monday. So like basically on the Monday of the second week of the month, you'll have like the various weekly, stabilization related governance polls, DIA stability fee primarily, and then the inclusion polls for any MIPs that have been submitted at that point, right? And then in week 3, and then at the end of, and the executive votes will happen at the end of, like the Friday executive votes will have to continue happen as well, right, at the same time. In week 3 we'll have a single governance poll alongside the weekly polls, and then in week 4, we'll have the governance polls for the weekly cycle on the Monday, and then we'll also have the executive vote for the monthly cycle on the Monday. And then this is where we actually have to make a small adjustment, right? Because since in week 4 there will also be a Friday executive vote, we'll have to, the only way to really make it work out well, I think, is to then make a small modification so that until we've gotten rid of the weekly cycle and replaced it with instant access modules, the monthly executive votes duration will have to be 4 days, right? So the monthly executive vote will be dropped and it'll be deployed on the Monday, and it will then expire on Thursday, so that on the Friday there can be the weekly executive vote can come, right? And then in this way it actually all fits together. I don't think there's, we'll find out if there's any conflicts beyond that, and we still need to look further into it. But basically, in theory, on paper, it all works out. And then in terms of what we're actually going to do, like literally what are we going to do, on May the 4th, when the formal submission phase begins of the first governance cycle. And the thing is, it was supposed to be that it should be collateral onboarding, right? And the risk team should do their first MIP 12 sub-proposals and all of that stuff. Now, given the whole reactive measures for the PEC, and I think there's a decent chance that the risk teams won't be able to, that they'll be spending so much time on that they don't have time to prepare to actually submit anything. And they probably were, it was, Link was one of the assets, right, they were looking at. So like basically, since that's going to be onboarded anyway on this rapid pace, there's a good chance that we'll actually have nothing for the first governance cycle, which is actually a good thing, I think, because that means we can then simply do we can actually have the first governance cycle as purely like a try, let's go through the motions, let's make I don't know, like a blue MIP and a red MIP, and then people can, they do nothing, but it's just like a test. And then as we go through the month, chances are we'll find some issue, and we can then, avoid having that issue when we're trying to pass some real proposal. But who knows? Maybe there is going to be a real proposal. In fact, there's a whole bunch of Oracle stuff already coming down, and like a bunch of other things. So maybe there's still a possibility there will be real things happening there. But no matter what, I think that the priority is that in June, then for sure we should see MIP-12 sub-proposals. I mean, that's really important, and I think everyone needs to work together to make sure that we get more collateral onboarded, starting from June, guaranteed, and then every single month from then on.
So maybe a clarifying question from myself then. Are you that would mean likely we'd want to be able to go through the entire MIP6 through MIP12 process for some of those for some of those first collateral types within the first months or starting May 4th, right? Or so like in the first weeks, if any MIP12 proposals would come, those would go through would obviously not go through the entire process, or like are already in the works, as you mentioned, but then like really maybe we could try to achieve a first like full sort of process by June, right?
Yeah, so, and there may be something to clarify on the whole collateral onboarding process is that actually MIP6, 8, and 9 are actually optional. So you don't actually need those in order to have a successful MIP12 onboarding. But it's simply that MIP12 is controlled by the domain teams, right? So they like gatekeep the MIP12 process, and they're the only, they're the community appoints who they trust to sort of have the access to MIP12, right? Because it's such a powerful process, right? And so what that means is that the domain teams, and this is a good thing, right? Because we need to make sure we have more flexibility and don't sort of get totally bogged down with bureaucracy, right? But like, so the domain teams can actually, if they don't have direction from the community, they will simply work on what they consider to be some good MIP12 sub-proposals if they've got nothing else to work with, right? So they don't just sit there doing nothing. And then MIP6, 8, and 9, they're like, that's a process to allow to sort of allow an equal access to the domain teams, right? So like, it's a process that allows anyone, regardless of whether you're like in every single governance call and totally knows everyone in the community and so on, right? Or whether you're a completely random or unknown project, but you have a legit token regardless, right? You should be able to get that formal access, right? And actually be able to sort of, post your application, have the community, go into the same process of being upvoted and downvoted by the community and so on. And then ultimately, the end result of the MIP6 to 9 process is the ranked community green light poll, right? So ultimately we end up with this ranked list that basically says, this is the top, this is what the community likes the most, and this is the stuff they maybe even voted to negative, right? So they kind of don't really want that. And then the domain teams again have the freedom to, they actually have the freedom to do whatever they want, but if they want to keep their jobs, they'll do well to, make sure that they make the community happy by generally picking what the community wants, right? With all the constraints that they know about, because you could easily have a situation where the community upvotes a bunch of really cool looking tokens that sound really great, like, PAX Gold. I know that's very popular right now, right? But the reality is PAX Gold is a bit more complicated to add than something like, I don't know, whatever, Link or WBTC, like, some ERC20 token that doesn't have more advanced logic, right? And so that's kind of I think the beauty of this process as it was designed, by the way, right, it's made by the Collateral Onboarding group. So it's actually made by a community group. I think that's important to put in there, right? It's not actually made by me and Charles as we formalize the MIPs. But so what's cool about this process is that on one hand, it has this rigorous end-to-end, transparent process, but on the other hand, there's actually tons of flexibility in there, and you can't really get stuck in the process if you're legit enough to the point where the domain teams believe that it furthers their own goals of remaining in good standing with the community and keeping their roles essentially to onboard your collateral.
So and I don't want to be the only one asking questions, but so if I think back of how collateral types have been added so far, there's BAT, which is based on I think a very early poll that was done ways back, and then there was the extraordinary circumstances that led to USDC being added. Sort of that was maybe like the most not really a process that we hope we have to repeat. But then sort of how do we go from that and the risk and governance weekly cadence of calls where collateral is being discussed right now to having the first sort of community ranked list, right? Like we could, like one idea, for example, would be to just look at the governance forum, and I think Joshua Pritkin, something like that, like went through a lot of these old threads where people were proposing collateral types, and like just looking at that and putting those up for a poll, or would it be a combined work product by like the current sort of active informal governance and risk team? I'm trying to brainstorm of ways that we can sort of get towards this force ranked list and start working on that and sort of align the community on that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the critical thing to focus on is the first greenlight poll in week 4, like the 4th week of May, right? So we have to have a really good pile of MIP6 applications ready by then. Yeah, I mean, I think what you're like, the best is that if people in this call or anyone who's interested go and make, I mean, I've seen already we've got the Uniswap. I believe we have one MIP6 application of the Uniswap token, but in my opinion, we should have like MIP6 applications for pretty much every single one of the major Uniswap tokens and major set protocol tokens and like all of that stuff where there's like a lot of repeatable but quality assets. And yeah, like all the other tokens that we mentioned, basically anyone from the community can do that. And potentially even the foundation is going to go in and just like make sure it gets done, because there's no reason not to have it in the first, like all of the stuff that's ERC20, like decent ERC20s, there's no reason why the community shouldn't be allowed to start deciding what they prefer, right, as soon as possible. And you know, beyond that, I also will expect that quite soon, like the floodgates will literally open up and we will see like tons and tons of projects that are not really on the radar right now, but it's sort of been waiting on the sidelines, been contacting the foundation, for instance, and asking how do we get considered as collateral. And this is in particular in the real world assets space, where there's just like tons of startups and projects out there that basically all will sort of soon enough become aware that, okay, there is a definitive process now, because that's always been what's holding people back, right? They've seen that, yeah, you can post in the forum, but nothing really happens when you go and post in the forum, like some of the projects already tried. But now there is going to be a process and something actually happens when you do it. And I think that that's going to be a signal that will propagate quite quickly, and we'll just see, you know, tons of MIP6 applications basically. And then on that note, right, this is actually the one thing I want to bring up before I leave, is that, so in addition to what I talked about with the MIP3 issue of like the interaction between the executive votes, there's actually one more issue right now in the MIPs, and that is that there's no filtering process for MIP6 applications going into the community greenlight pool. So like theoretically right now, the system is, you know, the process is vulnerable to like a spam attack where you like, you know, you create a MIP6 application for like every single token on CoinMarketCap, and you sort of theoretically fulfill all the requirements written in MIP6, right? But it's a bunch of garbage scam tokens. And we need some sort of filtering process in order to make sure that if someone did that, we wouldn't then end up with a greenlight pool with like 1,000 options, right? Because that would be unsustainable. And so one option is to simply say that MIP8 is the gatekeeper for MIP9. So like you have to successfully pass through MIP8 before you even get into MIP9, right? So you have to first get the domain teams to give their green light before you can get to the stage where the community has to give their green light. And then I think the other option is that you put it on some other domain rule, right? So I would say the MIP editor or something would have to, some very basic like spam prevention role. And I mean, I don't think we can necessarily solve for that now, but I just wanted to bring it up. And then I think we should basically have a quick discussion of that on the forum over the next couple of days, and then just come to put it in before the vote.
I mean, I think that the like asking the domain teams could lead to to similar like spam attacks on the domain teams that might be even more costly. But yeah, it would be. So would that be a sub proposal for MIP 8 or MIP? Yeah, MIP 8 that would come out in the next couple of days, I guess, that we would need to discuss.
So it would basically just be a change during, because we are still in the request for comments phase. It would be a change to either MIP 8 or MIP 6, either adding the filtering role to the MIP editor's list of responsibilities, or as maybe a separate component in MIP 8, or just adding additional logic. But I do think it is a really important thing to add before we actually get them ratified.
I mean, you could say that, and Charles, you proposed yourself as a first MIP editor, so maybe it would be, you would be, if you were to be tasked with that, I guess the recourse, if you were not to do a good job at that, would be that the community would have to vote in a new MIP editor, right?
Yeah, so the expectation actually,
filter.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like the other option would be the governance facilitator, like Long for Wisdom just mentioned in the chat, but you do want to kind of try to eliminate the amount of opinions that the governance facilitators have to share, well, personal opinions that is. But I do think it would either make sense to have either of those roles act as the filtering process. And just to clarify, there is the intention of onboarding a new MIP editor from the community after the MIPs are ratified. So that could also help spread out the responsibilities.
For what it's worth, I don't think that the filtering process should be any sort of, like, it should be like, I mean, it would have to be in practice something like work with the community to implement their understanding of what's spam and what isn't. Because if we try to set some sort of, we can have guidelines around what's like the concrete, maybe you have to have a market cap of 5 million or something. But in some cases, you'll have applications of tokens that are not even, or whatever, right? That just launched up, or for whatever reason, I don't think we want to make it like super rigid because they can still be gamed and so on. But like in practice, it would be like, is it a garbage token and everyone can tell it's a freaking garbage token, or is it not, right? It's really that simple. In which case, actually, in my opinion, it should be as many as possible should have the power. So maybe even the solution could be, if we don't want to put it on the domain teams, because we don't want to waste their bandwidth on this, it could actually even be both, right? It's going to be like basically any of the core roles have the ability to and basically it's as simple as like look at an application and say, this is not spam, right? So I think the more roles that are already trusted, that have that power, the better actually, because that should just make it a smoother experience.
I mean, they go like directly to the forum, right? So to some extent, like spam is like moderating the forum is like we have to do that anyway for like forum spam. So
yeah,
and to some extent it comes under that.
Yeah, that's also why I think it makes. So that's what it really it works. Actually, yeah, it sort of aligns pretty well with both what MIP editors and governance facilitators are meant to do. So yeah, maybe we could make a forum poll about this in the next couple of days, asking like, should it be the responsibility of the core domain teams, the core governance domain teams, or should it be the responsibility of the collateral onboarding domain teams, and then the community will pick one, and then we implement that.
I think, I initially wanted to know like how many people on the call and like were seriously considering submitting a MIP 6. I think one of the reasons was because I was trying to gauge like, okay, like how big of a wave of new collateral like proposals will actually hit your community that we will have to decide on, because I mean, yeah, like you could be the party pooper and create a little script that would submit one for each coin market cap coin, listed coin. But I mean, barring that, like looking sort of at the historic activity of the collateral discussion thread, and even if you extrapolate that by, or like multiply that by a factor of 10, probably the process we have right now should still work for the first couple of weeks, and could be something we can address later on. Nevertheless, so I think like having the discussion is good, but what do we really expect to see in the first couple of weeks? probably a load that we can work with. Though one question I had is like, I mean, there's the polling, but like for people to actually poll and sort of vote, they need to be able to sort of consume the information that is behind all these tokens. And so that's one thing I'm curious about. Like the governance and risk call is already chock full of content that I don't see that being the right place to sort of disseminate that information. I'm not sure if another format needs to be found besides just the forum threads, or if we can expect community members really to sort of read through all of these MIPs. Was there any discussion about that, or for yet another? I don't want to propose yet another call, but that could be interesting. I'm at least coming up with giving some airtime to maybe all of the proposers.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, just before I leave, I think it would be really cool to hear if there's someone else on this call who are considering submitting a MIP6.
And I know we're working with 2 asset originators that are probably going to try to make it in the first month, maybe the second one, but yeah.
I believe there needs to be a MIP6 for WBTC. I don't know if WBTC should go through the emergency pipeline that's going on in parallel, or if it should go through MIP6 or both, but I would at the very least think that it deserves to be there.
Is that something you'd want to make an application for? Then?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that would be really great, actually. Maybe even we could, I mean, so I've got to go now, but it could be cool if there's more people who could coordinate this way. So like, you know, so if Lev takes WBTC, who's going to take like Kyber? I think that's a token we've seen come up a lot. You know, maybe Kyber them, you know, maybe we should see if Kyber themselves will want to do it. But on the other hand, it would be cool if the community could sort of like internally coordinate and just like have a person being responsible for making a MIP6 for each of the obvious initial ones, and then make sure that's in place before the first greenlight poll. But anyway, I got to jump now. So great talking to all of you.
We'll update you on what we come up with.
Yeah, actually, just to further that point, I think it'd be really interesting if the community calls like this would continue, not necessarily every week or every 2 weeks, but as a way to bring everyone together who's been talking on the forums or in the chats to kind of identify who is going to propose certain collateral applications, as opposed to creating duplicates and just basically having the community self-appoint people to propose these and do all those kind of things. That'd be really interesting to see, in my opinion.
I think also it not maybe a call, yeah, to sort of organize around that, but then also call for the community to learn about these MIP6 proposals by the proposers would be also good as a way to sort of kick off the polling period, right? Because I think it's going to be a whole lot easier to listen in on a call and ask questions and sort of see these people present them as sort of motivating yourself to read through a list of MIP6 proposals.
Yeah, Long for Wisdom might want to chime in on that, because it is part of the process where the collateral proposer would kind of make this kind of pitch or their case to the community and answer the questions that have been posed in the forums. But let's see if he has anything else to add.
Yeah, just the reason we sort of, so like obviously the forum is better for like durable discussion, right? So if people want to sort of discuss things and have them, I guess, on the record, then the forum would be the place to go. But yeah, like alongside the MIP6 thing, there's like if anybody doing a MIP6 proposal, it's like anybody generally wants to like try and organize a meeting to discuss like why they think the Maker protocol should take their token and record it and post it, that's fine. Like it's or like, you know, invite everyone and then like record it as well, and so everyone can see it afterwards.
So I agree on like forum being sort of the persisted, like more more long-term discussion. Is there sort of a counter? I mean, and then looking at how the governance and risk process works, like right now, is there a desire by people to mirror the governance calls that's along with the forum or not? Like from just who's here? Love to hear.
Whether we do it as like a formal like MIPS call, I don't know. Like the option currently is kind of open for like anyone doing a MIP6 thing to like take initiative and organize a call if they want to discuss it. But yeah, we could potentially have like a formal weekly one, right?
I could see some value to having a regular scheduled MIP6 call, especially since this helps a little bit with figuring out what people should put at the top of their attention. And not to mention there's the difficulty of everyone coordinating side calls all over the place. You do actually want all of the active community members to, have a very high likelihood of showing up at these calls, which I think can only really be guaranteed when there's like a ritual to it in a way that the governance calls have.
That's why I really, that's why I really like putting one up sort of shortly before the vote, where like maybe the current candidates for vote could be, for like in the polling, could be discussed, and then also sort of you can have an idea of what is in the pipeline. So yeah, I think a lot of interesting debates get started in these calls, then turn to the forum, and then maybe come back and sort of this back and forth. I think like with the state of the PEG or the emergency measures and from the Black Thursday, right? And just in general, the regular cadence of the governance calls, I think, is quite helpful. So maybe that could be a thing that I don't know. I would propose we try to set up a few weeks down the road. Maybe like weekly is probably too much, but I'm happy to just try to get everyone together again in say 3 weeks, 2 weeks time, and sort of discuss sort of how this process went so far and what to do next. And then we can see if we want to turn that into a more formal process. So like from other participants in the call, like I'd love to hear what like sort of your questions and thoughts are on collateral onboarding, like specifically with regards to the MIPS process. Is there anyone that wants to propose a topic for discussion?
Yeah, I'm interested in understanding how MakerDAO can make sort of promises or guarantees to its client. So like, let's say a certain business uses it and they need a certain loan to value on their loan. So the DAO sets a liquidation ratio, but they sort of need that to stay in place for the business case of them using this. But then how do they know that the MKR holders aren't just going to vote to change the value in times of distress? Because, they're saying, well, some crazy things are happening. We need to do what we can to survive. So we have to change the liquidation ratio. And then they lose a client or erode the trust. So that's what I'm interested in.
I can tell you what Centrifuge is doing about that, but if there's someone else, leave it open. So we when we started designing sort of our system to bring like real world assets like invoices, for example, into MCD, our initial approach was just to say, okay, like the $100,000 invoice is going to be collateral worth $100,000, and the borrower borrows 50,000, and then Maker or MCD sort of has a claim on that $100,000 invoice. That is, and then you run into these issues where like if Maker now starts adjusting the loan to value ratio, like the stability fee, right? Like that's like that maybe puts the the borrower in a situation that is untenable for like someone that is sort of doing this with a traditional loans, they're counting on like being able to repay at a certain date or sort of having this stability. And so this makes sense for like highly liquid sort of fungible tokens. I think where you want this to be able to adjust these parameters. What we ended up doing at Centrifuge is we actually changed that and said the token that, or sort of the collateral that we give to Maker is not actually the asset itself, but it is an interest-bearing token that is backed by this collateral. So actually, we are not giving the sort of proposal we're going to move forward with is we're not going to say Maker should take these invoices as collateral, but Maker's actually just buying a portfolio of loans, and those loans guarantee certain cash flows. And that's the most you're going to get. It's still backed by this collateral, but it's backed by this collateral only to the amount that these loan terms say. And so now what if Maker, so for example, if this is an interest generating token generating 5% APR or 10% APR, and Maker were to double the stability fee, all that would happen is it would essentially force the asset into liquidation because now the return on this token is obviously lower than what Maker or what the system wants to charge. And so it would basically push those tokens out onto the market, trying to offload them, and whoever then would buy them would again not buy the $100,000 invoice on a $50,000 loan, but they would actually just get the interest-bearing token that has sort of an expected yield. So that's like one thing we're doing. I'm happy to share some stuff with you on that. Where like you can sort of generate borrowers guarantee borrowers an interest rate, while at the same time sort of giving Maker an interest in the overall collateral, but only up to this point. I don't know if other people thought about this issue, like there are other collateral types where this is a problem.
I asked the devs on a more sort of general note, like whether it would be possible for governance to like freeze a parameter for a certain duration. So that's vaguely related. I think the consensus is like yes, but like requires new contracts and things to manage those parameters.
Yeah. So sort of, are there any, one thing I'm curious about is, are there any people on this call that have looked at the elected paid contributors sort of process and are interested in sort of joining that, or have people in mind that would be a great add to the community or to Maker that we could start recruiting? I think there's a potential sort of to add more firepower and sort of more capacity to the community by sort of opening up that process.
I looked up at the editors, MIP editors, and Chris Pavano, who I know is an attorney. He'd be good for that. So that's the only one that I've thought of so far. But I know a few people who are in the media industry, so I'll look into that. But yeah, from the community, Chris Pavano for MIP editor. For the other one, for the pay, whatever you call them. No, I haven't thought of that. Not sure if anybody else here has.
I think long for wisdom, will you officially like be using that process as a governance facilitator?
Yeah, at some point I'll
cool.
be making us a proposal for me to become facilitator.
Yeah, just to chime in on that, the intention for the next little while is to start to onboard the MIP editor, which actually I just made my proposal today. I'll share it in the MIPS channel after this call, as well as onboarding Along for Wisdom as a governance facilitator, and then Mariano as the smart contract domain team. Those are the ones that are kind of in mind right now and can be done with the current process. So right now, as it stands, the process for electing the MIP editor and the governance facilitator are both covered in MIP 0. So there's the onboarding and offboarding processes and templates to fill out for those roles. And then there's MIP 7, which highlights the domain teams that are required for collateral onboarding. So that's risk, that's smart contract, that's oracles, and that is legal. Currently, the only officially ratified one is the oracles team, which was voted in prior to the MIPS process. So we are listing them there. And also on the MIP 0 side, Richard Brown, as everyone knows, was already ratified as the governance facilitator prior to the MIPS process as well. So he is listed there. In terms of the actual fully functional EPC, elected pay contributors MIP set, it is still in progress, and these things kind of cover the mechanisms in which they can get onboarded, the types of roles that are required to fulfill certain duties, maintain the protocol, solve the problem spaces, and additionally figuring out how they can actually get paid by the DAO and the protocol is all kind of in progress. So, I mean, if there are any ideas on how people would want to structure this or see how people would get elected, paid, and working and quantifying and qualitatively assessing their work, please propose ideas in the forums. But yeah, it's not officially created yet. So after the first two, sorry, go ahead. I can add a point after.
Finish your sentence.
I'm going to say, so after these first two MIP sets are ratified, there are plans to build other MIP sets to try and solve for the other problem spaces listed in MIP 1. Down the line, there's a lot of things that kind of need to happen, including the other third pillar of the self-sustaining DAO, which is vote delegation. So figuring out a technical solution in the form of a MIP set that covers vote delegation and how Maker would use it and all of those kind of things. So there's still a lot of MIP sets to be proposed and a lot of problems to be addressed in the first problem space. If anyone wants to reference them, definitely check out MIP 1.
Is there, can I ask, that you mentioned the oracles and the smart contracts domain teams. Is Maker Foundation going to be the interim legal domain team, or is there any movement, or is there any other entity that would, or individual that would sort of start there on the legal side?
No, they definitely will not be.
Yeah,
that much I can say. And then if the community wants to go out and contract or find legal resources for assistance in collateral evaluations, then that's something that is going to have to be spun up organically. But yeah, for what it's worth, we should not be expecting that the foundation legal team will be involved in the domain team process in any way.
Yeah.
So how is so that I think then could be a blocker for quite a few collateral types. I'm not sure what there's probably some. I mean, WBTC is probably not going to fall into that category, but quite a few where like legal questions are going to come up. Like, is there a strategy for, like, if we end up with like the community voting for a whole bunch of these assets where there needs to be a legal evaluation, like what are we going to do to make sure that these are not going to be blocked?
Yeah, so in general, in MIP 6, there's question number 10 and 11. So they are optional questions. However, they are extremely crucial in certain situations. So question 10 is, has your project obtained any legal opinions or memoranda regarding the regulatory standing of the token, or an explanation of the same perspective of any jurisdiction? So if those materials are available, please provide them. And question number 11 is, describe whether there are any regulatory registrations for the token and provide relative documentation for that, if applicable. So if the tokens or the collateral onboarders, yeah, Sorry, just checking Long's comment. Yeah. So, I mean, if the collateral proposal or the collateral type has a legal team and they have provided opinions and there are legal documents out there, it can be included in the collateral application and it's very helpful. But
okay. So yeah, so I think especially for a few of the, I mean, so there's a question of like how much the projects can do themselves and how much is like specific to Maker as a system with regards to these tokens, right? I mean, it's very different if you sell a security token to an individual or if you place it into some set of smart contracts that are extremely complex from a legal point of view. So it'll be yeah, I think one, as long for wisdom you mentioned, it's optional, but I think it would be prudent to still have an idea for how we assess that part.
Yeah, I agree. It would be ideal. I just yeah, I don't know how it's going to pan out at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's another one for Chris. Chris, the lawyer. No, just joking. What? Chris, do you know any lawyers that would be interested in here?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the problem is probably going to be is that it's like the provision of like legal advice, like it's, you know, it's tightly regulated.
Yeah.
It's always going to be like hard to make like broad pronouncements about, you know, like legal risk, you know, because it's kind of, you know, there's a lot of ambiguity in financial regulation just generally. And you know, if you contract that out, usually it's going to be, you're going to get a very conservative kind of opinion for the most part. And like with some, I mean, like on the security token side of things, like, I mean, maybe it's just better to kind of just like talk offline with potential security token issuers or other types of like regulated folks who interact with those tokens and try to come up with kind of like, I think it's in one of the MIPs, but like a risk framework, you know, like, I don't know how, like, but you know, we kind of all laugh at this shit sometimes because it's like, you know, Coinbase comes out with like a, you know, ICO risk framework or, you know, something like that. And it's all pretty wishy-washy, you know. I kind of think it's just, it might make sense to kind of just keep all that stuff in the forums and just talk about trying to price that risk as opposed to just being completely shut off to certain types of assets. Because there's definitely security tokens that are trading on Uniswap right now, right? Like there's that Real T platform, and they kind of have like one approach to how that works. And I don't know, there's just like a lot of like weird things that may happen, or just certain lawyers may have opinions about weird things happening once you start adding certain types of assets to the collateral pool and its effect on DAI. I don't know. It's all, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be easy to get specifics sometimes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I put up an hour for this, so we're sort of nearing the end, but so I just want to like open up the round once more, and for everyone chatting away happily. Yeah, like feel free to weigh in. So like Mona Supply saying security tokens may have lower liquidity because they can't legally be sold to US persons. So the legal risk sort of plays into economic risks as well. I think, yeah, that's like a very, very good point. Like you have to, I think one key point will be just like, okay, is there any legal risk for the project? But maybe that's less for MakerDAO, but more importantly, maybe like what does the keeper landscape look like for some of those assets that certain keepers might not want to own or cannot legally own or cannot legally sell after that, after buying them, right? So I think there will be some like out of the box or like not really following our current thinking required for like how those keepers are set up, how we think about the risk of those tokens and how we price them. Cool. So I think, yeah, I'd love to propose that we just do this call again. And so like sort of thinking about the cadence, I would maybe propose that we just do a collateral onboarding call in mid of May, and we can do a forum thread or a poll on finding a time. Or are there any other comments or remarks or different proposals?
So I guess the idea would be if I wanted to get some, I don't know, whatever, Kyber to propose a MIP6, would you say that you would want them to come on here, whatever, May, June, July, and kind of give a presentation why Kyber should be on, or any other ERC20?
That could be one thing we could do, or also just sort of maybe as a first step before we talk about proposers to present to the community, just coordinating about the onboarding process, right? So Lev mentioned possibly submitting WBTC. It'll probably be more like Mike from Wire submitted his idea with the fiat basket token. So like it could be just discussing sort of where all these different MIP6 proposals are and which ones go into MIP8 and how we make that process efficient.
Yeah, I'd maybe say it's pretty important to not set up the call as like something that gatekeeps like those MIP6 proposals, right? Like the idea should always be that anyone that wants to do one of these can just go and do it, right? Like should just go and do it, right? There should be no like, you don't need to wait around. You just go to the forum and you post the thing if you're interested.
Yeah, so I think step one will always be, or at any point in time, post a MIP6 proposal. Yeah, good one. Cool. Okay, then I think I would end the call and thank everyone for attending and providing feedback. And yeah, watch the forums for sort of what's going on. I'm looking forward to going through some of these processes in the coming weeks.
So before we end, I can just briefly go over the timeline.
Yeah, that'd be great.
If that's helpful for people. Yeah, so the MIPs are still in the request for comment phase, and I do want to note that there have been some changes to the MIPs, and some of you may have noticed, some of you may haven't, but we've basically made the changes to either improve clarity, formatting, or overall organization and readability. We are in the process of making all the templates in the MIPs themselves as external documents, and then also having separate folders for the incoming sub-proposals, just to better organize and make administrative strategies easier for us in the future. So you can see an example of that in MIP 0. I am going to make the changes for the rest of them today. In terms of the other changes to the collateral onboarding MIP set, there were a couple extra components added to MIP 8 to purely improve readability. So it was splitting up the main component there into 3 for requirements, process, etc. And we also added an active list of domain teams to MIP 7, as well as, well, it already existed in MIP 10 and 11, yeah. So it just kind of shows who are the active domain teams, who are the people on there, and also shows kind of the work they're doing. In terms of the timeline for the MIPS ratification, I know I've said this quite a bit, but on April 27th, we're going to have a timing vote, which is a special governance poll with 2 options. to either proceed with the ratification vote of the 13 initial proposed MIPs and the sub-proposals, which are the MIP editor, and I believe, I don't want to ruin it, but I believe Mariano might be posting his smart contract domain team sub-proposal today or tomorrow. So if that timing poll resolves to proceed with the ratification of the MIPs, we'll have a formal governance vote on over the course of May 1st to 4th. And if that poll does indeed ratify the MIPs, the first governance cycle that Rune described earlier on this call would begin on May 4th. So that's all for now. I mean, please keep discussing and commenting on the MIPs. I'll be sure to update the forum versions of the MIPs as soon as possible. But if anyone does want to see the most updated versions, please go to GitHub and please read them to see any changes if you want to suggest or propose against and those kind of things. But yeah, that's it.
Thanks for the update. The thing, if anyone is confused by any MIP at any point, ping me or Charles. Long for Wisdom is saying, I think I'm only confused about the 0 or 1 indexing, but no, just kidding.
Yeah, MIP 0 is a beast, and we've been trying to work on making the readability a lot better. It is the longest one by far, but yeah, you can ask me any questions you want at any time.
Yeah, cool. Okay. All right. Hey, thanks everyone for coming. We'll post the recording of this on the forum thread.
All right. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Have a good one. Bye.